Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. I'm not satisfied when I learn something new unless I share it forward. And so we created this podcast to continue that, to share forward the wonderful people we get to meet and most importantly get to learn from and make our lives richer and better. Together we'll cover the human experience. And for me, the human experience is foundational in the idea of relationships. The topics will be far-reaching, but common element you'll see here is it's all about relationships. So I invite you to join us on this journey. Come experience it with us, share your thoughts and ideas, and become part of our community. We'd love to have you.
Every year, nearly 16,000 children in the United States are diagnosed with childhood cancer. This diagnosis is as life-changing as it is heartbreaking. Today's guest, Dr. Noelle Cutter, knows this feeling firsthand. Dr. Cutter is a leading expert in biochemistry, disease, and cancer, as well as an associate professor at Molloy College. After she lost her nephew to childhood brain cancer, Dr. Noelle Cutter changed her life's trajectory and became a researcher and advocate for cancer treatment. She co-founded the Little Louie Foundation, a charitable group that helps meet the needs of families while their child is hospitalized for cancer treatment. Dr. Noelle is committed to helping find a cure for brain cancer through her scientific research. During the early days of the COVID pandemic, Dr. Noelle worked in a testing lab where she designed synthetic peptides to test for the presence of antibody in patient serum. She has authored and co-authored many publications in scientific journals, is a motivational speaker, and a member of the New York Cancer Research Alliance. In addition to being a mother to 4 young children, she is also an Ironman athlete and a marathon runner. Let's learn how Dr. Noelle shares it forward today on Celebrations Chatter.
Noelle Cutter, I'm privileged to work with you, president of the Dr. Noelle Cutter fan club, Brianna Stevenson. She thinks that you're pretty amazing. And from what I've read, heard, and watched on your TED Talk, I would agree.
Oh, thanks. Well, Brianna's an excellent student, but I appreciate that from her. Thanks.
So I'd love to get to know you a little bit. We see that you went to school here on Long Island. You went to Molloy College, then Molloy College, now Molloy University, undergrad, then Stony Brook. And we see that you worked at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories. We'd like to hear more about that. But you didn't start in college. Did you grow up here on Long Island?
I was born in South Florida, but my family moved up here when I was young. And
that's, everyone's doing that. They start in Florida and they move to New York. Well, maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, you know what? On a day like today, I think I'd rather be in South Florida. It's so cold out.
It feels like for me, I was traveling earlier in the week, but it seems like the first cold day to me this morning. When I came out, I said, maybe I should have put sleeves on.
Yes, or a jacket, something.
So you were born in South Florida, moved up to New York as a little one.
Yes.
And
went to school here. I grew up in West Hempstead. Half of my family still living in West Hempstead. Big decision on where to go to college. But the thing is, I played soccer. So Molloy offered me a great scholarship to play soccer and also pursue biology and the undergraduate degree. So
you knew the sciences were for you early on, huh?
I did. I always loved it. I think the wonderful thing about science, and now my daughter who's in middle school is starting to learn a little bit more about it now, is that chance for discovery, that instant where, especially in research, you might know something that the rest of the world doesn't know. Or if you don't know the answer to something, that you have the tools to be able to explore it. So I think that kind of always was something of mine when I grew up, that I was always really intrigued by learning how things worked and trying to, if I didn't know how to find that out.
It just might be my naivete, but it seems to me that in sciences, you're going to be judged a whole lot more on your work, on your work habits, your discipline, than any other field, because it's so outcome-based. It's so rigor-based.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sometimes makes it both challenging, but I always say it's supported by the evidence. you always have that evidence to support whatever it is you're researching or talking about or sharing information, especially when you're speaking to the public. I think that's the most fruitful thing, is that you have the evidence to support whatever claims you're making. Because in science, our tools get better. And so if things change, we're open to that. We understand that things might change. And if the evidence supports changes, then we'll rewrite the textbooks and we'll rewrite the literature and we'll share that new information. So that's what I love about science.
Well, you seem like the real package in terms of as your parents, thinking about, here I have this kid who's a very good athlete, and she's interested in the sciences and good at that. It strikes me as a little contradictory, though, that you'd expect that someone who is comfortable in a lab and comfortable working alone has also got this very disciplined and social side of her. I see how comfortable you are speaking in public. It's part of what you do in terms of your life in academia. Were you always an outgoing? Did you always have both the outgoing social personality and the inner reflective disciplined science in you?
Yeah, I mean, I was always social. So soccer is a team-based sport, and I never really thought of science as not a team-based approach. So even though you do spend plenty of time alone in the lab, you're always supported by mentors and, collaborators, other graduate students, postdocs in the lab. And I think that one of the reasons I've been successful in my field is that team-based approach, and maybe why I went into education, so that I can now give that social personality to my students. But I don't know. I never felt like I was alone in science. I always felt like it was a team-based approach.
And being a Long Islander, where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at West Hempstead High School.
I have my oldest granddaughter, who I was with last night because her youngest sister had a birthday. But my oldest granddaughter is 14 and just looking at high schools now. And one of them is her mom's alma mater in West Hempstead, Sacred Heart.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they have a really great science program there. Yeah, the president of Molloy, Jim Lentini, his daughter goes there. That's nice. They always present at the Molloy Science Fair. So really great science program.
The idea of the Molloy College, when you went there, now being Molloy University, was that a big deal to expand their academic capabilities and presentations so that they could qualify to be also a university?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years, we've really seen that. We've seen the majors grow, of course, the School of Nursing grow. I'm going to personally say biology, some of the work that our undergraduate students is really it's really transformative, and they're doing amazing things. And today the students are presenting at their research colloquium. It's been really great. And to be able to get that university status, I can only imagine where the next 5-10 years will take us.
Is that an especially big deal for you in the sciences in your program to be able to attract the kinds of students and the kinds of teaching professionals that you'd like there?
I sure hope so. I mean, I feel like biology especially has a proven track record of how well and how capable our students are. And it would be really great to allow faculty to do more research, to be able to take more students, to continue those efforts. I'd really love to see those facilities grow and, under the mentorship of the wonderful faculty that I already work with in biology. And I really hope that that's the case.
Being a Long Islander and knowing Molloy for a long time, it's always had a great brand reputation around nursing.
Yeah.
And certainly the stature and high regard for nursing has never been higher than in this, let's call it late COVID period, where we've seen the heroism of the nursing professionals across the country, across the world. So that program has never been more important. How is enrollment? Is it attracted more people to nursing as a profession?
Yeah, we actually have our highest nursing class, our nursing cohort this year. So yes, absolutely. And I fully support that. I mean, we need nurses. We need people in those spaces working with patients.
I think the Molloy offers a PhD in nursing, don't they?
Yes, they have the DMP, they have the PhD. So absolutely. There's a lot of places that these students can go even after they get their RN. So
a friend of ours, his wife received her PhD in nursing there earlier this year, late last year, earlier this year, and it's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
She's a lot like you in the sense that a full-time working nurse professional, 4 kids, and juggling all of that, and she finishes her PhD too. Just a big wow.
Yeah, well, I always say, because everyone's like, how do you do it with 4 kids? I'm like, I did not do my PhD. I was just pregnant when I defended to get my PhD. So hats off to moms who are doing it with little ones at home. I cannot imagine that is champion.
Oh, let's not discount what you do. Yeah, 4 kids. You said the oldest is early teen or about to be a teen?
She's preteen. So she's 11 going on 17 at this rate. But yeah.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I have 9-year-old twins and an 8-year-old.
Oh, good. Quite a noisy cluster.
Yes, they are noisy. Yes, they are.
All good noise, though, I'm sure.
Yes, it is. We're very blessed.
And you mentioned that all through school you played soccer.
Yeah.
And I understand from Brianna that you continue to be an active athlete, that you're a triathlon, you do Ironmans from time to time, you're a marathon runner. You're still keeping active?
Absolutely. I was just on the bike for an hour and a half this morning. So I advise a lot of students. I'm the faculty athletic representative here, and they always have that, what am I going to do after college? Not playing sports is taking away part of that student athlete that I am. And I said, you're going to go into running and triathlon. Like, you will find something to fill that space.
I have 3 kids and 7 grandkids. And I'm always encouraging my kids and their partners to make sure you introduce the kids. They're not going to be great athletes because they're burdened with my genes, but encourage them to participate in things that they'll do their whole life.
Yeah.
I don't know too many people in their 50s who are still playing tackle football, but tennis and swimming and sailing and running, those are things that you'll do your whole life long. Skiing, and especially if you're introduced to them at a young age. Mm-hmm. It seems that kids who learn to ski when they're barely walking just develop so quickly and so naturally, whereas when you start in your 20s or 30s like me, it's a tougher hill to climb. Pardon the pun.
That's really great advice, though. I don't know that my husband's 42 and he still plays soccer, but those it's different.
So you do have ice packs around the house? Yes,
we do, and crutches in case we need them.
So let's talk about your STEM career here. During your TED talk that I had the opportunity to see, you talked about a tragic story about your nephew Louie, an 18-month-old. Tell us that story, when it happened in your life and how it's impacted and influenced your career.
Yeah. So my nephew Lewis, my brother's son, he was diagnosed with a rare but very aggressive form of brain cancer known as medulloblastoma. In April 2006, he presented with clumsiness, crankiness. He was only 18 months at the time, and he very tragically lost his life within 6 weeks of the diagnosis. At that time,
what symptoms presented themselves?
Yeah, so when people are diagnosed with medulloblastoma, there's lots of different symptoms that they can present with. Hydrocephaly is one of them, so that's swelling of the brain, swelling of the skull. It can actually push on the optic nerves, and your eyes can bulge. Being that he was so little, normal things like gait and handwriting, and with the tumor being in the cerebellum, it's like your fine motor skills. So it's often difficult to differentiate when you have a little toddler running
at that young age. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But he presented with things like vomiting, just an unsteady gait, more unsteady than you would expect for a toddler at that age. Yeah, headaches, just general crankiness. And it was just, unfortunately, in children, especially 5 and under, medulloblastoma is very aggressive. And you also have to tailor the treatment plans, because the normal chemotherapy, radiation, proton therapy, surgery, they can be very devastating to very, very young children and have
absolutely
lifelong effects.
What do we think causes this?
So I'm a molecular biologist. I think everything has its roots in some sort of genetics. When we look at medulloblastomas in the lab, we look at the molecular classification. So there's 4 main classification, all based on genetic signatures. So, the wingless, which has the best prognosis for patients. You have a sonic hedgehog, which is typically probably what Louie had, but we weren't at those stages where we were molecularly classifying tumors at the time. And then the
Is that
group
right?
3. Yeah,
It's that current, huh?
yeah, it was like
Recent.
2016 who came out with the classifications for medulloblastoma. And this was 2006. Louis would have been 18 in December. So
Yep.
it's a long time ago. Then it was just, here's the tumor. Let's look at it under a microscope. Let's see how it looks under a microscope, and we'll classify it based on that. But now we know, let's take those tumors and let's bring it to the lab, right? That's why I love research. We can look at it in the lab, and we can do those molecular tests on it to really differentiate. And that's, once we know
Years ago,
that.
where were you in your academic career, I assume?
Yeah. So in 2006, I had just been accepted to a PhD, actually an MD PhD program. I had worked out at Brookhaven National Labs. I was working in a space radiation laboratory. And, we were on the mission to Mars.
Pretty amazing place, Brookhaven, huh?
It is. We got to use the collider. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to study space science. I want to work with astronauts. We were particularly interested in DNA damage that astronauts would face should they go to Mars, or really just in space in general. So I had accepted a position at MD Anderson in Houston. So that would allow me to continue with the research, the same sort of research that I had started at. And so that was literally in April 2006, signed my paperwork. My husband and I were looking at apartments. Louis got sick. Everything just spiraled. Really, everything happened so fast. Just at that time, I knew leaving my family was not the best option. We needed to support each other. I had thankfully been accepted to Stony Brook as well. And I just decided, let's just stay home for right now. I could always go back to MD Anderson if I wanted to. And it was the best decision I made. It really changed my trajectory. Instead of going to study space science, I knew that I wanted to study cancer, and more importantly, how it could happen so quickly and what could we do better so that it doesn't happen again. How can we work to make sure patients are diagnosed sooner and treated better?
We're all fortunate that you made that decision, especially the emotional side of that, making a decision that it was better for you and your family if you were all together. It speaks so much to you as a person, and the benefits of family and extended family, especially when dealing with tough things like grief and loss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Couldn't say enough about that and your decision. You mentioned that as a molecular biologist, you think everything starts at the genetic level. Help me understand how the influence of environment, climate would impact cancers. I'm trying to guess ahead here, but would the environmental and climatic impact on their parents influence their genes that could influence the molecular passing of things that could result in cancers like this?
Yeah, so I think making connections to the impact of the environment on cancer is really hard to do. So we can make correlations, but the causation, I think, is challenging. I think when we think about genetic changes, we can make more direct causation links to cancer. We know that the environment can impact us in so many different ways. So one of the things I'm very interested in is it's what's known as epigenetics. So that's not actually making mutations to the DNA sequencing, rather alterations that may impact how certain genes get expressed at certain times. So certainly the environment can make impacts in that sort of a way. For a tumor like medulloblastoma, it is an embryonal tumor. So it would have been something that happened during embryonic development, during cell differentiation. So at that very, very early stages. I wouldn't say at that point that would be an environmental impact. That's just something during development that's gone wrong. But yes, certainly genetic mutations, we know about so many bona fide drivers of cancer that happen to the 40,000 genes that may be present. So, but definitely the environment is impactful, the climate, everything. Those causation links are a little bit more challenging, and that's why we do the research.
I saw a presentation earlier this week at a conference, a conference called Techonomy 22, and a fellow was talking about the amount of plastics that we produce as a planet, how we use them, how we need to change how we discard them, reuse them, recycle them. The data he presented was just astonishing. And how we already now have evidence of it being in our plastics and plastic microfibers in our soil, in our food supply, and in our bodies. Is that something that you have a great deal of concern about too?
Absolutely. I mean, the ways that we've impacted our environment are incredible. Humans are so smart. We can find ways to fix these problems that we've caused. It's just a matter of the time and the energy, and that the evidence is there, right? So they've presented this evidence. So now we know what the problem is. We can figure out a way to fix it. So that's what I truly believe. And that's what I think the discipline of science and research in science is so impactful. But yeah, I mean, it's astounding. What is it? There's more plastic than fish in the ocean, and it's scary. But I do think I'm a positive person. I do think there's a way to solve this.
The encouraging thing about his talk was he's a capitalist and a proud capitalist, and he's developed an exchange that brings capitalism to the table to solve that solution. And it's an economic model that rewards individuals and companies and people in groups to gather the plastic, to recycle it. And I think and hope it will catch on and really begin to make a difference because of all the things you stated in terms of, we produce a lot of plastics, wonderful thing. They can be great, but it's all about how we manage the use of them and the recycling of them and the disposition of them after they're manufactured. And when you can make it economically worthwhile for people, it will change behavior. And that's the only way we're really going to tackle this problem, is bringing the wonders of capitalism to bear to fix these issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and by the way, some good leadership here would be beneficial. As a country, we should be the leaders.
Yeah.
We should seize the moral higher ground. And I hear people make the argument, well, why would we worry about the emissions from one electric generating plant when China's building 40 new coal plants this year? Well, you have to start somewhere, and it takes a movement, and movements take leaders, and shouldn't it be our responsibility as a people, as a country, to be the leaders and to develop the technologies and the techniques that'll get others to come along. We've seen it happen in many other regards, and we're proud as Americans and North Americans that we export our entertainment industry and our culture around the world. Well, if we make this a part of our culture, we can influence the whole world from a leadership point of view. Yeah.
And you know what? Working with undergraduates, everything that you just said is what our next generation is all about. Those future leaders, I think, are changing that sort of mindset. They really are so connected to the earth. They're so connected on this idea of transformation, on this idea of sustainability, on this idea that all the problems that the previous generations have caused, that they're driven and they're passionate about that, and they want to fix the world. I mean, it's so humbling, because their sense of that we need to do something now, that I really truly believe that they will.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
Find the perfect gift.
And wow the people you love.
Wow. This is amazing.
Whether you want to say happy birthday,
So cute.
Or I love you.
I love you too.
thinking of you.
Wow.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
Celebrate the people you love.
Let's talk about that generation, this Generation C. I just this week learned from a friend of mine, a really smart lady named Tina Sharkey, that I was wondering, what's the next generation going to be called? We got a Z. And of course, her solution was it's Generation A, Generation Alpha.
Alpha, that's what I was going to say. It's going to be Alpha.
That's what I just learned this week. So you would be tapped into it because you work with young people all the time. But talk about this Generation C, and we hope that we're in late stage COVID here in 2022. You were active in the lab in your science part of your your career on COVID-19. So I'd love to hear about that. Really curious to hear how you think this has impacted the kids now that are seniors and juniors in college, and what the interruption of COVID-19 has meant to their academic lives, to their social lives, what you forecast is going to be the long-term impacts of that. So let's start with the science of COVID and how you were involved there early on.
So early on in the pandemic, there was like kind of a call to scientists in general. We were just learning about this virus. How do we diagnose it? How do we treat it? A friend of mine who I went to graduate school with was working with a biotech company out in Smithtown. And he said, we just need hands. We're running samples. We don't, we're working 24/7. Do you know anyone? So I immediately signed myself up. And I had two of a graduate student of mine and a soon to be graduating undergraduate. All three of us signed up, went to the lab, worked mostly nights because I had the family at home and my kids were being homeschooled. So I also became an elementary school teacher. And I'd go and I'd work to hours of the night. We were working on the platform for the ELISA testing, which was to see if people had antibodies to COVID-19. Part of my role was in designing of those peptide sequences that would interact with the serum samples from patients. And so we were doing diagnostics for a couple different urgent cares across Long Island. I can't, hats off to the two students who came to work with me. I think they learned a lot. They learned the process of science and running hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of samples at a time. But it was really kind of an all hands on deck effort as the scientist point of view. And then I think
they learned a whole lot more than a science.
It was just using that evidence-based approach to educate the public. I don't even know how it happened. I think I was just using my social media platform, sharing about the work that I was doing and trying to educate people about what COVID-19 was and why we wear masks. And when the vaccine started to come out, just kind of educating on what the vaccine was, what it wasn't. I gave presentations. I helped, especially in small firms and foundations, just kind of talk to ease some of the concerns that people had, more of just kind of a friendly conversation, really more than you should get the vaccine sort of talk. Just kind of listen to what they had to say, listen to their concerns and their questions, try to answer them as best as possible. That actually caused me to have Laura Curran had reached out, the Nassau County former executive, and she just asked if I would be part of the presentation.
I'm a Laura Curran fan.
Oh yeah, she's wonderful. And she just asked if I would come to, speak to the public, one of those Facebook Live sessions. And that was an incredible experience. And, I was just really using my platform to do what I do, science, to do research, to show that evidence-based approach, to provide resources to people who maybe even never heard of messenger RNA. And, I never thought that it was a job or a chore. It's just what I love to do. I love to educate people and connect with people. And if I can do that, that's wonderful.
Let's chat a little bit about that mRNA platform. It's more than a 20-year-old platform. The scientists who developed that and have been promoting that for all these many years certainly hit a home run for the world by sticking with it and bringing this as a platform to us. I wonder, as a molecular biologist and someone who's keenly aware of the difference between old vaccines, which were developing, enlivening your immune system, to the difference with an mRNA platform. I wonder, let's look forward a few years, put your prediction hat on. I wonder if there'll be some big breakthrough changes that'll come because of our forced adoption of the mRNA platform. Can you think of any other good things that might come out of this in the next 5 to 10 years?
With my cancer hat, that's all that's buzzing right now. The idea that the vaccine technology in the treatment against cancer, that hasn't taken off quite yet, but that we can study that now in the lab and try to understand how or if that'll work. And I think it will. It's just kind of finding the right combinations, to make sure that it's safe and effective in patients. One of the things we talk about in science is that bench to bedside approach works wonderful at the bench And now how do we translate that into working with patients? And that's why we do all those clinical trials to make sure that it's safe and effective in people.
I was wondering if, because the common cold is a COVID-based infection, I wondered, could mRNA cure the common cold? And here we are in the fall, winter of 22, and we're dealing with these respiratory ailments in kids. We're dealing with a very heavy flu season. And, oh, by the way, the hopefully remnants of COVID, and they're expected to be quite active throughout this winter season. It makes you wonder, when you get optimistic and all of a sudden you have the storm of all these things hitting at once. It's a challenge, especially especially sensitive to you, I'm sure, with the experience you and your family had with Louie, hearing about all these kids requiring pediatric ICU space and oxygen to overcome these respiratory ailments. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, viruses they're tricky. I don't even want to call them organisms, right? So they teeter the line of living and non-living. What they're really good at is changing their nucleic acid sequence, whether it's RNA or DNA. Their nucleic acid wrapped in protein coats. They mutate easily, they mutate frequently, and it does make them challenging targets. But again, that to me, that's like saying a computer is unsurfable or the moon is unwalkable. I think all things are possible with science if people work together. Designing vaccines are certainly challenging with viruses, especially like the cold virus, which is slightly different, and influenza, which changes seasonally.
Lots of talk about in this late COVID era about long COVID. The research center at NYU Langone, they received a federal grant to be the coordinating research body for everything that goes on nationally in terms of research on long COVID. And the lady who runs that facility tells me that we should be concerned because she thinks long COVID will be the thing we most talk about in research in medicine and in medical research over the next 10 years, because we just don't know what we're in for. Is that something that you share a concern about?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the advocacy groups that I work with, this is a mutual concern among, I think, all scientists. We just don't know, right? So we don't know what the future is going to hold. The preliminary evidence is showing that it's certainly a concern to have. Viruses can be latent. The fact that COVID can infect so many cells with the ACE2 receptor, we really don't know. Again, that continued research, those facilities that are looking at long COVID, I think we really need to be putting more emphasis in there, some good research dollars. I absolutely share that concern.
Well, I'm glad to see the government is working here in that they've spent a lot of money early on to really bolster the academic research capability here in anticipation that long COVID will be something we're dealing with certainly for the next 10 years. So my applause to our government system. We're here because it clearly looks like it's working.
Yeah.
Let's move to the question I put on the table for you before.
Sure.
You're in academia, you teach, you do research, and you have a couple of hobbies on the side, like working out and raising kids and running a family.
Just some
Tell
small
us
things.
about and writing and speaking and all those other things. But tell me about the kids that you're working with now over the last two or 3 years, and what impact are you seeing this COVID have on them, good and bad?
I think one of the biggest concerns is coming out of that generation where a lot of stuff was online. That's not to say that's a good or a bad thing. Some online platform delivery of education is wonderful. I'm more concerned about students having missed those social interactions. If we think about them coming into college and maybe not having the last 2 years, social interactions with their peers, they're coming in with a lot of, it's post-traumatic stress. I can personally say in my own family, we had a kindergartner, we had 2 first graders. Those social experiences sometimes are, if not more important as the academic piece, and the mental health that surrounds that trauma that they've experienced is a real thing. And I think we being our society, need to be really focused on how we support the student holistically. I think we're kind of good in academia. We know how to support them academically. We need tutoring, we need lots of kind of things in place to kind of support them academically. But I think the piece that's missing is that holistic part of education, that mental health and wellness, that academic pathways may not be as clear cut as they once were. And we have to kind of, we can't conform to that old model of education that this is the only path to a degree, that there's going to be multiple paths to a degree, and we need to support how students learn and that they've come to us with a lot of stress. I think that actually goes with the faculty as well.
How are the faculty, and how is Molloy as a university adjusting to what you just said, which is that there needs to be several paths to a degree and different paces, different types of learning?
My colleagues and I, the administration, recognize this. We just had a meeting earlier this week about student success, and it mentioned all of these different ideas and how there's so many confounding outside impacts that these students might be faced with. And we really need to adjust to their learning style, to the trauma that they faced, to providing that support beyond the classroom. And what does that look like? So I've learned a lot just from the Student Counseling Center, the Access and Disability Support Center. We've brought wonderful speakers who have dealt with student and trauma. So they really are providing so many resources for the faculty so that we can be prepared to work with these students. And I think it's going to be ongoing. I don't think it's ended. I think it's just a matter of having those conversations and being open to that change.
I think one good thing, I think you just touched on it, that might come from this, or I think maybe already has come from this, is the idea that counseling is a negative thing. Oh my God, they had to go for counseling. I think that's been pushed to the side to some extent. And I'm a big proponent of digital counseling. There's a company I invested in called Talkspace. The founders, who I met several years ago, told me their premise to build their business, which is a virtual counseling service, the intermediary, the matchmaker that facilitates all that. They said that more than 50% of the adults in the United States are referred for counseling by their primary care physician for one reason or another during their lifetime, and yet less than 3% of them ever go. And I asked, well, why is it such a small percentage? And they said they break it down to three things: cost, access, and stigma. I thought, well, what a wonderful premise for a business plan then, because the virtual counseling eliminates most of all of those three, in that it can be very easy from a time point of view. Access is guaranteed if you have an internet connection. And the stigma goes away if you're not going and sitting in some doctor's office, and more and more people are doing it. So I'm encouraged that perhaps one of the good byproducts of this whole COVID experience is that people realize that there's nothing wrong. In fact, there's something very positive about seeking counseling and getting good counseling. And if it's digital, that's fine too, especially if you live in a spot where you don't have access. And if you can have a 10-minute session with a professional therapist who knows you and can use other digital tools to deliver a good product to you on a regular basis. And if you can do a 10-minute session Monday, Wednesday, and Friday before you're off to work, how wonderful is that? You're seeing the acceptance of counseling more frequently now on your campus?
Absolutely. Students are more willing to share. I don't feel like they think there's a stigma around it at all. And our counseling center is available to them. They have online appointments. It's free, it's confidential, but I find most students are pretty forthcoming with issues. And again, that goes back to being flexible as a professor and understanding that they're coming to you with this, and that, due dates might need to be flexible, and that you have to be a human first, before you're, people are late or handing in assignments late or need a little extra time. I think that's something that's important. But I don't find that they think there's a stigma around it anymore. I think that's our generation. I think the Gen Z realize that that's important, and that's great, because I think we all could use counseling, just someone to talk to. I think that's really important. I wish it was more cost effective.
Yeah, I agree. And I know you're an advocate for healthcare in general being more approachable, more available, and more cost effective. Any thoughts and ideas off the top of your head in terms of how we could move closer to that in terms of healthcare in general, not just mental health care?
I think the model of a society where everyone has health insurance, I don't know. I think that it shouldn't matter where you work or where you live. We all should have access to the best doctors, the best treatments. And I think that just goes back to the collaborative approach. I don't know how to do that at a government level without sounding like we want to live in a national health service place. But I really strongly feel that we have the United States, we have the best doctors that are here solving the most challenging problems. And it just seems unfair that we don't have access.
You know what the key to good health care here in the U.S. is? It's access. And that's what you're targeting here. I know during your TED Talk, I was surprised to hear about your not surprised that you were advocating, but surprised to hear from a research point of view that you were concerned that there's still too much siloed work and not enough sharing, building upon other people's work until after it's published. Do you see anything good going on there that gives you hope that that'll change a bit? Because when I heard you say that, I thought back of when Michael Milken was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And here he's a very talented, financially astute and very wealthy man. And he made it his mission, not just for himself, but for others, to break down those walls and to have people collaborate around specifically prostate cancer. And it seemed to me he was very successful in making that happen. Is my understanding correct? And how might that happen in other areas so that there is that collaboration and that you get the multiplier effect of all that wonderful research work going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it better. When I was in grad school, it was always, is someone going to publish before me and is my project going to be scooped? There's certainly, I think, echoes of that, especially in academia, because there's just not as much money as if you're working in biotech or pharmaceuticals. I know now with the Cancer Genome Atlas, I think just being in New York and Long Island, connections with Mount Sinai, Memorial Sloan, Cornell, Cold Spring Harbor. So we're starting to see a lot more of those collaborations where each kind of used to work and operate independently. But yeah, I think the collaborative approach is becoming a realistic,
that's good
scientific approach. Yeah.
So when you were over at Cold Spring Harbor Lab working with Dr. Watson, trying to educate him, what was that experience like at Cold Spring?
It was never felt like, oh my God, I'm working in this amazing place, just because everyone is.
But you were.
I know. And it is an amazing place. And now I go back there and I'm awestruck, but because not only is it a beautiful campus, but it's got so much history and incredible science that's going on. And I'm just happy that I can go back. And one of the roles that I play there now is talking to graduate students and postdocs about transitioning from being at the bench to working in education and what's that like. When I was there, I think the most impactful thing that it gave me was connections, and then being able to hear scientists, Nobel Prize winning scientists, they would come to Cold Spring Harbor to speak, and the campus was open. If you worked there, if you were a student there, you could go to all those. You didn't have to pay for anything. You just could go to those talks. You could participate in those conferences. I think about that now, and I'm like, I wish I took more advantage of it at the time.
I remember being at a dinner on a dais years ago and sat next to Dr. Watson. And I'm sitting there thinking, this poor man having to sit next to me is doing algorithms in his head just to entertain himself. But when you drive by that beautiful campus and off of Northern Boulevard there, 25A, and you look up and you say, my goodness, what a collection of some of the best brains in the world. What must be going on in there today?
Well, they're a pretty public place. You should drive on campus.
I don't think I make the IQ threshold. They turn me away.
No, they wouldn't. I remember, I think Dr. Watson had come out with a new book, and there was like a big book signing, and it was always like a star-struck presence when he was there and walking around. But there's so much. The science there is incredible. We're really fortunate here on Long Island to have that exposure.
He lit the fuse on.
Yes.
Nothing short of amazing. You're nothing short of amazing.
Oh, well,
I'm sure you hear it all the time, but Brianna was right about how amazing you are and how lucky she was to go to Molloy University and to have be in your class and to get to know you and to benefit from the interaction, and how beneficial it is for all the students there to get to see you. And you set a high bar as a role model in terms of juggling all the things you do. We talked about it in the beginning. You're an athlete, you're a mom, you're an academic, you're a researcher, you're a consultant, you're a speaker, you're a writer. Amazing set of activities. But as an old boss of mine said, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person, because busy people don't have time for the nonsense. They just get it done. And I feel bad for your 4 kids, because I don't think you tolerate any lollygagging around. They got to get it done.
Yeah, they do have to get it done. But you know what? I always, with Brianna and all the students I work with, and my own children, as much as they might look up to me, they've impacted me so much. It's their view on the world, their love of learning, their curiosity that drives me. Like, I'm doing it for them. Like, I want to make this world a better place for them, whatever that takes. That's the athlete in me, right? You've got a goal in mind and you're going to accomplish it.
Well, you certainly are putting up the check marks, and we're so thrilled that your parents had the good sense to leave that beautiful weather in Southern Florida and migrate to Long Island, and we're proud to call you ours. So thanks for all that you do, and thanks for sharing your time with us today. It's been a treat for me to get to know you. And I'm going to go get a wig and disguise myself as a young person and hang out in one of your classes.
That would be great. I'd love that.
Thanks, Dr. Cutter. Thanks for sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Celebrations Chatter. You can join our community by reaching out at chatter@celebrations.com. And while you're at it, tell us what topics you'd like us to explore here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to share it forward.